Very good. Thank you so much. All right. So let's presume that, and hopefully people have already started a lot of their planning, but let's presume they're starting right now. What are 3 things you recommend that they think about?
So my grandfather used to tell me, plan your work and work your plan. And if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So it goes back to what Drew was talking about in regards to having a plan as you go in. And one of the things they say is hope is not a strategy, right? You hope that things are going to happen, does not make sure that you're going to meet your outcome or your goal or your target. So one of the things that has been said is that 50% of deals fail due to poor qualification. So if you're not qualifying those deals, if you're not understanding your customer, as Drew just said, that's going to be a significant impact. Well, the other thing I talk about, and of course I'm biased to partners, bringing your partners early. Some sellers like to go lone wolf it and bring in the partners at the end, bringing them in at the beginning because they have the domain expertise, they have the insights, they have the information, and a lot of times they have the contract vehicles for you to get access to that particular customer. And 3 is understand your customer's calendar. Right. So I work across federal and state and local. So federal, we're looking at the federal fiscal year. At state and local, we're looking at the state and local fiscal year. And sometimes EDU is a little bit different. So being able to understand their cycle, because a lot of the sales happen at Q3 and Q4, but you want to make sure you're doing your planning in Q1 and Q2. So if you're not doing your planning, prospecting, and engagement at that period in time, if you're not understanding what those requirements will be, when that customer has some sweet money or has some extra funding that they're looking to explore or do pilots or proof of concepts, that may be your opportunity. So you want to make sure that you are tackling that. So those are some insights that I would share as far as preparing as you go forward.
It's imperative upon selling professionals to educate their customers, help them understand not just how their technology will help, but how the overall scope of things. You know, I did a Sales Game Changers podcast with a couple of CIOs for the government. And the one bit of advice, well, they gave us a lot of advice, but the final thought was, help me understand where the market is. You know, give me those insights.
So one of the things that a lot of folks say is put yourself in the shoes of your customer. And fortunately, I was a customer at one point. I was a core for multiple IDIQs, BPAs, and task orders. So in regards to my meetings, I had a lot of meetings with the industry, and they would come into my office. And I actually had this reputation of having 7 a.m. meetings and 7:30 meetings. I didn't like it that much, but that was when I had time. So when I would meet with industry, one of the things I could tell is that if someone knew my business, right? Know your business. So if you don't know what my agency does, if you don't know the mission areas, if you don't know the legislation, if you don't know the presence management agenda, if you don't know my budget, if you don't know my wins or my priorities, then it's going to be a pretty boring conversation. But if you come in knowing part of that, that will actually help accelerate the conversation, because then I'm interested in what it is you do. Because now you're talking to me about how your product aligns or how your services align with my mission versus with just saying, okay, well, this is what we do. And yes, we support all these great Fortune 500 companies. Secondly, we used to talk about the contract vehicles. How can I get to you? So if you don't have a contract vehicle that I can get to, and it becomes a science exercise for us to do work together, then it's not going to go very far. So being able to just understand what contract vehicles or what partnerships or even what joint ventures you have to get access to my agency is also very important. 3 is when you're looking at having that conversation, get me to a point where I know your resources and I want to do a whiteboarding session with you, right? It's really getting from a discovery to a demo. That is what you're looking to do. So therefore, when you get to from discovery to demo, the discovery is getting the interest of that customer, because as Melissa said, they've already did the research. It's a second meeting for you. It's not the first meeting for you. They already met with you online. So if they did that research online and they're meeting with you in person, they already have enough to be dangerous to know your organization, but now they want to see, is it worth them investing additional time and learning more because they know it will bring value to their organization and agency. The other thing is an opportunity is understand the OIG and GAO reports. They are also helpful. They provide some insights, but also there was a term that, that you can't get out skiing in the lodge, right? It's another term that I use, but I'll use that one for right now. And what I'm saying is that your customers or the decision makers or the thought leaders are getting out to events. They're speaking at events. So when you're meeting with them and you get the opportunity to have audience with them, hopefully you're taking notes and you're understanding what they're talking about on stage, because that makes that conversation go that much further, because a lot of them are talking about the priorities of their organizations at that time. So those are things from a customer perspective that they're looking for, and that actually helps the conversation go a lot smoother. But we talk about the 6 Ps, and this prior preparation prevents piss poor performance, or lines. So we always say prepare, right? The second thing is, have your notes tool. Like, what do you track for notes? Right? Because I don't trust my memory. I don't know if many of you trust yours, but being able to have some kind of note tracker, and then, by the way, put it in the CRM. That's really important, because what you're doing is creating continuity. You're not going to remember the meeting that you had 3 months ago, but that meeting may just be as critical in that upcoming meeting. And if you did not take those notes and you're trying to shuffle through the pages that you wrote in or the email that you sent, that's going to take time up. So making sure that you put that in and associate it with that account. So that's going to be important.
Let's get specific. 3 things that your reps should be doing to grow their partnerships.
Absolutely. So 3 E's. 1 is engage. 2nd is enable. 3rd is execute. Right. So when you talk about engagement, it goes back to what Melissa was saying. You want to develop a channel strategy with your sellers. So making sure that you have partners that align with their specific accounts. With your partners in particular, you want to make sure that you have a joint business plan and what you're going to go after together. So what you have achieved together, what target agencies you're going to go after, and also what capabilities you're going to build upon. And then when we talk about enablement, how do you do your targeted enablement at the account level, but how do you do your broad enablement based on your releases that you're taking out? And also having those cadence calls. So I usually tell my team we have to go vertically and horizontally within our partner. So this way we're developing deeper relationships. And the execution part is really around these 5 things, right? What we're booking with our partners, what we're pipelining with our partners, what we're enabling with our customers, with our partners, who are we meeting and what kind of plan do we have? And then what is the focus of our engagement? So being able to have that in place is really important. So those 3 E's, when you talk about engagement, enablement, and execution, are what are the 3 most critical things in having a strong relationship.
So let's talk about, let's address it from the seller side and from the customer side. What are you seeing people do, et cetera? What are your recommendations on how sellers should be using AI specifically to gain that 2026 advantage? And just curiously, if there's any mistakes that you see them doing as well.
One of the things that, I tell our team to take into account is your company has to embrace that AI is part of the business process and that they are using it to some degree. So being able to make your employees comfortable with the use of AI, I think, is a starting point. And that's being able to educate them on those uses. So whether it's an LLM that you're using, whether that's Gemini, Claude, or ChatGPT, those are all useful for them to gain insight. So when you talk about strategy, when you talk about planning, when you talk about cadence calls, when you talk about having fun, right? Those are things that they should be building. But one of the things you caution against is the over-reliance. You still want to make sure you're using your cognitive ability in order to provide insight into that approach. The other thing that we talk about is what tools are you using to maneuver, right? So when we do certain promotions, we're using the image tools. So you can use Sora, right? Sora is a good tool to use for that. And there's other, Canva is another one. But also when you think about video, right now, people are more engaging with video than they are with images. So being able to leverage that for your sales approach. So those are things that you can use, but also how are you automating email? How are you using AI for you, right? How are you framing your emails? Because one thing that they, did in some research is that AI was introduced as a way to increase productivity, increase quality, and reduce the amount of time that it takes to execute functions that they attempted in the past. So if your team is able to do that, that's where AI can be a real game changer for you. Now, there are other tools that are within your network and within your infrastructure that may be used. For instance, when you're doing forecasting, pipeline, when to move something to a new stage, what are some of the things that you should be thinking about from a med pick perspective? So being able to utilize the tools effectively, because you have the NLPs, you have the LLMs, you have the image tools, you have the video tools, but then you have the tools that have it under the hood. And then you have your own companies that are incorporating technology and AI into that solution that they have to know as well. So I would say all those are truly critical in regards to your approach, but make it part of the plan. The difference between contacts and contracts is relationships. And that's what it comes down to. And you can't do that with AI.
give us the audience some advice on how do you build that brand? What does it mean? The word brand in this context, and give a couple of thoughts, ideas. Like I mentioned, the one bit of advice we always give is you want to be the guy or gal who's the cybersecurity expert for the Navy. And if you're local, you want to be the top real estate agent in McLean or whatever it might be.
I'm a quote guy. I like quotes a lot. I do a lot of quotes, and so I share 4. 2 by Mahatma Gandhi. So Mahatma Gandhi said, "Be the change you want to see in the world," but he also said, "Live as if you're going to die tomorrow. Learn as if you're going to live forever." Right. So being able to talk about that preparation, that's part of your brand, right? You want to be able to know what you're talking about because people can sniff BS. The other thing Colin Powell would say is luck is when preparation meets opportunity. Right. So once again, there's a theme that's happening here when we talk about brand. And lastly is by Maya Angelou, who said that people forget what you said or what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. So being able to understand what that means is super critical and super important. And that's why when I talk about brand, I try to really focus it in on that. And, everyone doesn't know how to have the presence, but also giving feedback is so important. I say it breaks down to head, heart, and hands when you talk about culture of a people, because with the head is what people think in their environment. The heart is what people feel, and the hands are what people do. So if you are creating an environment where they're fearless and they can come and be able to present their authentic self, you'll get a better product on the outcome, right? So I do emphasize that. One of the things that I operate on is my 5 eyes. All right. So I want to focus on innovation. I want to focus on inspiration. I want to focus on impact. I want to focus on information sharing. I want to focus on the ability to inspire, right, and impact. So those are things that I do. So that actually helps translate into how I go about posting certain information. So if you see me post online, it usually is around opportunity, right? Because folks are always looking for opportunity. It's around information because people want to gain insight. It's around impact because we want to make sure that we're not only impacting professionally, but also we're impacting in our communities. Right? So being able to talk about those things actually become your brand and you become more aware and they become more aware of who you are. And it's not just isolated to a badge or a logo that you may wear. It is who you are. So being able to show up in a way that is memorable, that is captivating, that is charismatic to a certain extent is very helpful. But even if you're not that, just own who you are, own it and show up. And I will say that that's brand. Now, I post to LinkedIn a lot, right? I have a lot of engagement. You may see me on yours. Yeah, well,
never.
But, I'm very consistent, right? How many of you seen the post of like, why is Darryl posting that? Never, right? Because I'm very focused on that branding. I'm very focused on that outcome, and I'm very focused on that impact. So being able to do that, but your brand is not only your digital brand, it's your personal brand. Who are you personally? Right? Because you can't be Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde or Mrs. Hyde when you're in your personal capacity, you're this way. And then when you're in professional capacity, because it's going to come out, right? Social media is going to have that, right? The other thing that I talk about is your digital experience. So being able to say, well, who you are as a human, right? And bringing that human element, because that's what people want. People want authenticity. When a customer meets with you, they not only want to know what your company does, but ultimately they want to know who you are. And once they find out who you are, they'll make a decision based on that information.
I want to thank our panelists. Before I ask you for your final thought, I'd like to each of you to submit to the audience a habit that you do religiously, whenever, morning, week, whatever, a habit that you do that you wish that your sales professionals also did that has led to your success.
All right. So as far as key takeaways, right? So we talked about hope is not a strategy, right? So being able to use AI to inform you and be a co-pilot. One of the things that I wanted to mention earlier was that when I was in the CTO's office, my favorite Marvel character is Iron Man. So I'll think about AI like Jarvis, right? So it's a co-pilot. So use AI as a co-pilot. It's going to be very helpful. In regards to partner, right? Bring your partners in, right? Bring your partners, help them be part of an extension of your sales team, of your sales motion. That's going to be important. Third is understand your customer's calendar, right? Being able to understand their calendar, understand their priorities, understand their impact that they're trying to make is going to be very helpful for you. And I think lastly is like own your brand. Whatever that is, be able to show up in that authentic self. So this way you can be seen as someone who can be trusted, because trust is such a big capital in our space. In regards to what I do in the morning, I usually go on walks, but also I do meditation. I do the QuickBooks. So, there's some QuickBook apps. If you have one recommendations, I can tell you. I also grab a lot of information. I like a lot of publications. If you want some more information, I can tell you. And also just kind of getting my mind ready for the day and catching up on,
Nice and succinct. I want to thank the panelists for the great ideas. You definitely exceeded what we were hoping to get across today, and this should definitely give a nice launch for people to succeed in sales in their 2026 plan. Give us a nice crisp thought.
All right. So I mentioned a couple of them. I think when you talk about 26, plan your work and work your plan, right? And if you fail to plan, you plan fail. So being able to plan is important. I talked about the 6 Ps, right? So preparation is also important as you continue to execute. Being able to, really just know your business, right? And invest in you, not only from a professional perspective, from a personal perspective, but also learn your business, learn your technology, be able to be as knowledgeable, because once again, your customer is looking for you to be a partner in the process, not a seller in the process. And I would say lastly is just continue to communicate, continue to get feedback. And when you get that feedback, make the necessary adjustments.